Now, we're less than 24 hours away from the casting of the first votes in the first stage of the 2024 US presidential election. In Iowa, Republican voters will gather across the state for its caucuses to kick off the party's nomination process. The former US President Donald Trump begins caucus day with major momentum to win. Other candidates, such as Governor Ron DeSantis and former Governor and Ambassador Nikki Haley, are competing to become the Republican candidate. It's set to be a historic night, not just because of the political drama that's surrounding former President Trump and his Republican primary challengers, but because of the bitterly cold weather that they're having there at the moment. Just in the last week, Iowa has been hit by blizzards with life-threateningly low temperatures. Well, our presenter, Katrina Perry, is in Iowa for us, and she talked about the fact that former President Trump was expected to come out way ahead of the others.
He's been ahead in every poll that's been taken here in Iowa and nationally since polling for this cycle began. The latest poll came from the very respected newspaper Des Moines Register in conjunction with NBC News. That came out on Saturday night. That had Donald Trump at 48%. Behind him, Nikki Haley on 20%. So more than twice the number of people who say they'll vote for Nikki Haley are saying they're going to vote for Donald Trump. And that poll is traditionally very accurate. Interestingly, it often is an outlier poll, and whoever tends to win that poll and win Iowa does not go on then to win the presidency. But Donald Trump this time round is setting to break a whole pile of records here in Iowa. He wants to win the poll here by a margin that has never happened before, to send a signal to the rest of the field, the rest of the country, that he is the Republican nominee, notwithstanding legal challenges and everything else that he is dealing with at the moment, that he intends to fight for and, he would say, win the seat in the White House, the seat at the Resolute desk in the Oval Office in the election come November. So a fierce contest on here, even though it would look, for all intents and purposes, that the result at this point is a done deal, but you can't ever say that in American politics.
No, you can't. That's Katrina Perry in Iowa. Well, Larry Gersten is a professor of political science at San Jose State University. He's also the author of Trumpism, Bigotry and the Threat to American Democracy. And he explained about the weather conditions in Iowa and how that could affect turnout.
It certainly may change the outcome. We know this much. Iowans are very hardy people, but when you're talking about 0 degrees Fahrenheit, even the hardiest are going to think about this twice. So it gets down to organization, campaign organization. Which of these campaigns is organized the best? Because the better organized you are, the easier it will be for you to get out those people who are your supporters to those 1,500 or so precincts, those little gathering places across the states, where all of the people who would vote go to listen to the various candidates in each of their spots or their representatives, and then decide after a while, okay, who am I going to vote for? All those votes are added up, and then in a day, 2, 3, sometimes a week, depending, we'll get the final results. But yes, there'll be people coming out, perhaps not as many, and that's why campaign organization becomes very, very critical. Don't want to make too many predictions about Iowa. This is really an election of expectations. We know that former President Trump, I should say, is expected to get about 50%. If he exceeds that greatly, that makes it much easier for him to go on to New Hampshire, South Carolina, and wrap this nomination up very quickly. If he's below 50, let's say he's at 45 or 43, then he has not met expectations, and that would hurt him. The same thing goes with the others. If Nikki Haley has a strong second, let's say gets up closer to 30% instead of the 20% the polls show her now, that will invite a lot of money and a lot of interest, buzz, if you will, for New Hampshire, where she's only 7 points behind right now. So it's not only about the numbers and who wins and who loses and what place, but it's also the expectations for each of the candidates going into this very important first election. So you're having 40 delegates out of 2,500 who will be selected. So it really doesn't matter mathematically, but the idea, let's say, that Trump faults in some way, and doesn't do so well, or does much better, that will set the tone. And when you're talking about races early on, it's so often the case that they do. But as was discussed earlier, the last 3 times we had races for the nomination, every time the person won in Iowa, he did not go on to win later on.